jump into this?
I'm ready.
Words About Books is a poorly spoken podcast. Once a month, we dive into a selected piece of literature and discuss that in depth. But, well, the last book only lasted 2 weeks. So instead, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of books that we'll probably never read on this podcast because there's like a billion of them. So I'm Nate, that's Ben, and today we're talking about specifically Ben's experience with the Star Wars Expanded Universe.
Yeah, because bizarrely, despite you being the more enthusiastic of the two of us about it, I have read way more of the Expanded Universe.
Way more.
How far have you gotten in it?
I have gotten to Dark Force Rising.
So all you've ever read is the Thrawn stuff?
I have only ever read these 2 Thrawn books. Yeah. I knew about... I don't even know how, because I had the internet, but I don't think I looked for it. But I somehow knew about some of the things that were going on with the Star Wars EU as it was happening. And I know you started telling me.
Yeah, the EU also has it had a really good continuity manager. There were a lot of people that were really dedicated to making sure every entry into the EU that was quote unquote canon fit and didn't contradict anything.
I wish we had that for Eden.
If you played any of the games that were canon, if you engaged with any of the comic books that were technically canon, they all meshed really well, and they referenced one another really well. So, Thrawn is not forgotten in the EU. Even though I haven't read the Thrawn trilogy, I knew from reading other books in the EU who Thrawn was and roughly what had happened with him.
Yeah, I think I really interacted with Star Wars more through the video games. Jedi Outcast was a favorite of mine.
Yep. Yeah, with Kyle Katarn.
Yeah, Kyle Katarn. He fought a lizard man.
I think he actually was in the books. I'm not sure if those games were considered canon.
Oh my god, they weren't?
I don't know. Well, there's the games where you can kind of choose a path.
Well, that one was not a choose a path.
Yeah.
He was definitely a light side guy at the end.
Yeah, I think he's in the books.
I think so too.
He's not one of the main Jedi in the books.
That's unfortunate.
There's a few they get a new Jedi Council eventually, and
were they just as useless as the original Jedi Council?
No, they were actually. I really
God.
enjoyed the new Jedi Council stuff. So I guess I should say I was pretty negative on the Thrawn trilogy, and I talked about it a little bit in those episodes, that it's going to seem like I don't like Star Wars. And that's mostly because by the time we had started this podcast, I was really burnt out on Star Wars. Am really burnt out on Star Wars. And that wasn't always the case. I used to be a big fan. I was a big fan specifically before it was acquired by Disney. And I want to clarify that unlike a lot of people, I did not immediately jump off the train when Disney acquired it. I had some hope for it, but I think I was done with the books at that point. Because there are now books that exist within the Disney canon, which includes all of the previous films plus the new Disney films, but not the expanded universe material from early on. It doesn't include the books. It doesn't include...
Thrawn's still around.
I don't mind them keeping Thrawn. I wish they'd kept a little bit more from the expanded universe in the new Disney canon. I wish they'd kept some of the characters that were adjacent to the main cast. I wish they'd kept Mara Jade and Jason and Jaina Solo, and...
But instead you got Ben Solo.
Yeah. So
have you? I know you said it in our Heir to the Empire special edition, but I really like that Han decided to name his son after some old guy that his friend knew for a little bit and whose religion he openly mocked to his face. That was really nice of him to...
So we'll get to this in order, but in the books, Luke's son is Ben Skywalker, which makes sense because Luke was the one who knew Obi-Wan Kenobi by the nickname Ben Kenobi. Han never even knew Obi-Wan by that name. Not to mention it's weird that he named his son after Obi-Wan. If he did, we're not really sure why it was Ben Solo, other than that was the same syllables as Han Solo. But getting ahead of myself. So when Disney made the expanded universe not canon anymore, I kind of got off the train. I had invested a lot of time, dozens of books at that point I had read, and I was just ready to move on with my reading life. I only have so many hours in the day to read, and I had kind of developed a fondness for that canon where Luke, Leia, and Han had continued to go on adventures and stuff, and I didn't really want to get into the new Disney canon, so I don't even know what any of the new books are like. I never really gave them a shot. They could be fine. They're by the same group of authors. They kept all the authors.
They might even explain the 7th movie to me in a way that it makes sense for them to be calling themselves the Rebels.
So there was a lot of retconning in the old EU too. When the prequels came out,
oh god,
there was a lot of gap filling.
You know what they really should have done? They should have just retconned the movies out of existence.
Yeah, they did.
They should have been like, these movies, they're bad. They're objectively bad. I know that they're selling some breakfast cereal on the Clone Wars, and that's cool and all, but, they're bad.
They did so much work to give Darth Maul a character.
Yeah, I heard he had a whole arc off screen, both before he fought in the first movie and after when he got, robot spider legs.
Yep. Yeah, and that's another thing that Disney decided to keep that I was like, oh, you're really picking,
He's a recognizable character, Ben.
He is.
I mean, is he? I guess he had a look and he had a weapon. But he said 3 lines of dialogue, at last we'll have our revenge.
Well, yeah, it's purely designed for Darth Maul. He's got an excellent look to him. He has a really cool silhouette. The moment where those double doors open and it's him standing there and he ignites the double lightsaber and you're just like, oh my god.
Yeah, that's when you're like, oh my god, this is the best and also only good part of this entire movie. As a kid, you're like, when does Darth Maul show up?
But yeah, so obviously then the Disney movies came out, and I liked The Force Awakens, and I liked Rogue One. I didn't like the other 2 of the main trilogy, and I didn't see the Han Solo movie. Is there another one I'm missing? Have they done another one?
Did you say Rogue One?
I liked Rogue One.
I didn't care for it. No, I think that was it. Rogue One, Solo,
I haven't
the 3.
seen The Mandalorian, but my brother has a Disney Plus account, so maybe I'll watch it eventually. I did log on to Disney Plus once through my brother's account to watch The Simpsons.
Ooh.
I have yet to watch any of their award-winning television shows.
Man,
So
The Simpsons won awards
that's true.
20 years ago.
It's really fun to go back and watch the old Simpsons and the old Family Guys where they mock Disney.
Oh boy.
It's if you'd only known.
They had to know deep down, I'm willing to bend over for a big enough check.
Oh yeah, but back in the late 80s, early 90s, nobody thought that was going to be Disney. Disney was what they had, Aladdin, and I want to say that was the last big success for a while. They were not doing great.
So what we should do is we should start mocking Disney and maybe they'll buy us up.
Eventually, Disney will just buy all the podcast platforms that we release on.
So they will, in effect, own us.
Yeah.
Okay. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah, if Disney buys Spotify, that's 40% of our audience right there. So yeah, that's my history with the EU. I liked it a lot. And then when the canon got reset, I just thought this is probably a good point to take a break. and I don't regret it. Now, like I said, I feel bad though because the same group of authors. So the expanded universe had this like stable of authors that they always drew from, and they'd add people or remove people here and there. And their names you see from a lot of like franchise book series, like Karen Travis, Timothy Zahn, R.A. Salvatore. We were talking about.
I believe it's R.A. Salvatore.
It's Bob Salvatore if you're friendly with him. Like I am. But yeah, so they're authors you might recognize if you're into franchise books.
So let's start the discussion then. You said you got off when Disney made it non-canon. When did you get on? What was like some of the first book or the first couple books that you read for the EU?
So going back to like, I don't know, maybe high school, maybe even junior high, I would read here and there. Like, people knew I liked Star Wars and they knew I liked reading, so occasionally I'd get like gifted a book, and I got gifted one of the Darth Maul ones. I read that, and I was gifted another book. I think it was one of the more kid books, because they also had like there's a series of like children's, chapter books, and there's a series of like novels for like older teens and adults. And I think I might have read one or two of the like Young Jedi series. I forget what it's called. It's with Jason and Jaina growing up in Luke's Harry Potter Jedi school. And they're canon. They found ways to make it canon. They just go on their little school adventures. But I think when I really started getting into the, I guess the meat of the EU was I started reading the Legacy of the Force series.
Oh my God. Which one is that?
I mean, I guess spoilers for the whole EU.
Yeah.
The Legacy of the Force series is Han Solo in the expanded universe has two twins, the ones Leia's pregnant with now in the Thrawn books. Their names are Jason and Jaina.
He also has a third kid. I think he's dead, though?
He's dead by Legacy of the Force. He dies in the Yuzon Vong War.
Oh my God.
That's Anakin Solo.
Oh, okay. Anyway.
So Jason is kind of like a Force prodigy, and he's very much into like the intellectual, philosophical side of the Force. And during the Yuzon Vong War, he kind of leads the Jedi down a path of embracing a more gray Jedi type path. And that means they occasionally will tap into the dark side. As time goes on, Luke begins to suspect that was kind of a misstep, and he kind of pulls back on that. But Jason goes like full tilt into it and wants to explore like everything the dark side has to offer. That eventually leads to him falling to the dark side, and over the course of a 7-book series, I forget, he falls completely to the dark side, and he is kind of irredeemably lost, and it falls to Jaina Solo, who, well, super skilled in the Force, super strong in the Force, has not usually been she's more like hands-on. She's more hand-to-hand combat. She's more of a mechanic. Takes more after Han than Leia. It falls to her to kill Jason.
Well, that should be easy if she's the better hand-to-hand.
Well, but Jason is like practically a wizard, essentially.
Oh.
I mean, he is like, he knows every trick in the Force book. So why and how did he become an evil space wizard? It's kind of just the progressive nature of tapping into the dark side. He eventually, like, the dark side demands that you dominate and conquer, and he eventually just takes a bunch of steps that he can't take back. He initially thinks he can use it without it changing him, and he's wrong about that.
I see. So the Force is a living thing, then?
It's up in the air. I mean, it's to become stronger with the dark side. It's kind of like when Luke said that he didn't want to go in and scramble those people's brains because he didn't get a good vibe from it. The Force is kind of life, and there is a predatory dark side of life. There is death and decay and domination and power and all that. And so the more you use the dark side, the more it warps you. I think that's what they're going for with the Force in those books, is that it's almost karmic. Like, the way you use the Force is the way the Force uses you.
I see. Which kind of makes sense, because most dark side users, their bodies don't look too great.
Yeah. Yeah, the physical transformation thing, they definitely borrowed that from the prequels, how Vader's eyes start to go yellow.
Oh, I thought it was more from... I kind of thought that the Emperor was kind of a gross old man, partially because of the dark side.
Yeah, it's tough to say whether it's like the dark side itself or whether it's just, design choices, because it's supposed to be a very clear-cut good and evil story.
Yeah.
I read a lot. I probably am reading too much into my interpretation of what the Force was doing. I don't know if that's really what the authors intended to convey, but one of the things I liked about it was they did kind of leave it vague. They didn't tell you that there were midichlorians or anything. Like,
do they ever mention midichlorians in these books, like, ever?
Not that I can recall. They may in some of the expressly, like, Old Republic books, but as far as I know, Luke was never told about them and doesn't know about them. They do know that the Force Force sensitivity is a heritable trait. So Luke does kind of have moments of speculation about that, because he allows his Jedi to have relationships and marry, and they tend to marry other Jedi, which at the time the EU ended was leading to kind of dynasty families almost within the Jedi Order. There were a lot of like powerful families coming up, not just the Skywalkers.
Oh, I'm sure that leads to great things. I could foresee nothing terrible going wrong as a result of that.
Yeah. Oh, and I guess major spoilers for Thrawn. Jason Solo kills Mara Jade.
Yeah, I knew that. He kills Mara Jade. But
that pissed me off. Mara. I liked Mara a lot in Legacy of the Force.
Yeah, what are some other things about Legacy of the Force that like stood out to you? Because I remember you seemed to really enjoy it way back in the day, because I know you brought it up in conversation more than once.
I like Legacy of the Force a lot. It might actually be my favorite Star Wars story. I don't know if that's a popular opinion, though. I seem to remember reading that a lot of people did not like Legacy of the Force. It goes on a bit too long. It's a lot of the criticisms I would have of Thrawn, the D&D wandering path of the story. That never really goes away. That's persistent throughout the whole EU. There was enough stuff going on, though, that I liked it. I like big lore dumps. So when people are just like drizzling that Force knowledge all over their sandwich, I can eat that. But they do play all the hits. They bring back all the characters. They bring back Luke, Lando, Han, Leia. Chewbacca is dead at this point.
Yeah, a moon was dropped on him.
A moon was dropped on him.
I remember you told me that, and I busted out laughing.
Yeah, that was in the Vong Wars. That wasn't in Legacy of the Force. But that was pretty good, actually. I mean, it sounds comedic to just say a moon fell on him, but there was more to it than that. It was staged properly, and it had a lot of emotional impact. It wasn't just like he's just walking down the street and a moon falls on him,
which would still be funny. I mean,
it's he dies a hero's death. But yeah, Legacy of the Force, so you don't have Chewie, but you got everybody else. There is Boba Fett comes back, and Boba Fett is the one that teaches Jaina how to kill Jedi. So she has to go train with Boba Fett. Boba Fett in this one of the standout moments for me, the ultimate fan service, is Boba Fett like pulls his cloak aside, right? And he's got, like a shady salesman. He's got like a dozen lightsabers from all the Jedi he's killed. And he pulls one out and he can lightsaber fight without the Force. Like he's just skilled enough in hand-to-hand combat to not cut his limbs off. Also, you find out that the Mandalorian armor is made out of a particular metal, and it is bad. I'm losing my nerd cred because I can't remember what it's called.
Oh no.
But the Mandalorian armor cannot be cut by lightsabers.
Oh my god. Is it the same stuff that the Shadow Troopers in Jedi Outcast wore?
It could well be. Honest to God, they weave a lot of that stuff into the games. I want to say it was like Beskar steel.
Oh yeah, you're right. Beskar Mandalorian iron.
Yes.
Which is not what they had on the Shadow Troopers. That was some other thing.
Yes. There's a bunch of armors that can like disrupt the lightsabers. It's also very like not well defined what lightsabers even are, why they repel one another.
But that's another one of those things where Star Wars is not a hard science series, so like, shut up.
Well, they do kind of over explain, but the thing I like is like with Timothy Zahn, the first book we talked about with Thrawn, where he has that planet that has like a high gravitational field or something. He talks about he has some big set piece that's really cool. And so a lot of the space battles and technologies, they remain surprisingly consistent. So more what the stakes are for a particular battle. Like if there's now maybe this is just as I've read dozens of these novels, I get a feel for like, okay, if there's 2 interdictor ships and 3 star destroyers, that's a big challenge for a Mon Calamari cruiser. Like, that's the nerd knowledge you start to build up.
I see. So it does give a sense of tension.
Yeah. Now you start to learn the stakes.
Now, with that tension, do you as a reader, or did you as a reader, ever go like, well, they're facing off against Luke, or they're facing off against Han, so, like, obviously, they're gonna lose, or at the very least, our hero is gonna escape. Like, did they have a lot of plot armor for those guys?
They do. They do have plot armor, but one of Luke's biggest challenges is he doesn't really ever know if he's being a good Jedi Master. He doesn't know if he's doing the right thing.
He seems to have that as early as Thrawn.
Yeah, and so that's his central conflict. You don't know if Luke's making good decisions. And he does make bad decisions. He arguably could have done more to prevent Jacen Solo's fall, for example. But when he fights, it's Luke Skywalker. If you're fighting Luke Skywalker, if you're not the boss monster, you're not going to win. But they play it as Luke Skywalker is just that powerful now. But they arrange situations such that one guy with a lightsaber is not going to make or break the battle. So while Luke can win any lightsaber fight he's in, while he can win any spaceship dogfight he's in, that's not going to help him in galactic politics.
I mean, if he wanted to get some more dark side cred, it could. Hey, Feola, guess what? Bam! No more head for you.
I like that with Luke. I think they handle him well. But that's what I mean when I said, too, that because Thrawn's story so closely follows Luke, Han, and Leia, there's not a lot they can do. Not every story in the EU is centered on Luke. So for a lot of Legacy of the Force, you're not following Luke. He's there, he's doing stuff. But Jacen and Jaina are the 2 I remember most from Legacy of the Force.
And it sounds like it's more their story anyway.
Yeah. Well, and Ben Skywalker. Because Jacen sort of takes Ben Skywalker as his apprentice. And part of Luke's challenge there is how does he keep Ben from falling to the dark side, is he a good father, basically? Because he and Mara have obviously been basically wandering mercenary / vigilante / government spy / diplomat for their entire lives. Ben Skywalker has been taken care of by half a dozen different people, and when he's with his parents, he's constantly in danger, and Luke does have moments where he's like, not a good way to raise a kid.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of Luke's stuff is more like, it's not about him fighting. It's about him figuring out his place in the universe. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
He's also trying to restore the Jedi properly.
Yeah, I'd say so. And Leia eventually does try to pick her Jedi training back up again. She wants to retire from politics and work as a Jedi. And so she's going on sort of her first adventures as like a true Jedi Knight. And Han is around, and they do have
he's there.
they have to deal with that because Han doesn't have Chewie anymore. So that's a big thing, actually. He never really gets over that entirely.
Yeah, his friend had a moon dropped on him.
Well, and his friend had a moon dropped on him to save Han's son. That's the twist there.
Does he blame his son?
Initially, he has a hard time reconciling it. I don't think it's written all over his face, and his son is a Jedi, so he doesn't need to say it. He just needs to think it. So,
oh boy,
that is so I'll tell you now, the Yuzon Vong War, I think that's the new Jedi Order series. That goes on entirely too long.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's either 9 books or 12 books.
Is it only 12 books?
Oh, let me look it up now.
I wanted to say like closer to 24.
Oh my god! So, did you read that series?
Yeah, I read the whole thing, and I remember like you know how I said we could just drop chapter 8 from Dark Force Rising. We could drop whole books from that series.
Let's see.
I'm pretty sure I read every book in the New Jedi Order.
18 books, it looks like. And you're going to love this. There was a trilogy that was turned into a duology, so they dropped a book, and they dropped an entire trilogy from the Thrawn. So it was originally going to be 21 episodes, or 21 books.
Yeah, maybe I'm also lumping in the Swarm Wars. Is that right?
Oh my god, what is that?
That comes after the Vong Wars. I think it's still New Jedi Order. I want to say there's 3 books that have some insectoid theme
that just kind of blends into Thrawn or to use.
It's kind of like a true sequel to it. Nothing of like super importance happens, but you get to go on one last adventure with the whole crew from the New Jedi Order series before they blow that up by having Jason turn evil.
Oh, okay. By the way, I think I miscount. I think it was actually 19 books. But I don't see the Swarm included in this. So if you include the Swarm, I'm sure there's more.
It's not part of the New Jedi. Well, it's not part of the Yuzon Vong Wars. The Vong Wars are over.
Dark Nest trilogy?
Yes. That's what it is.
Yeah, that immediately that immediately succeeded it. So
yeah.
So that's another. That's 22 if you end up lumping that together in your mind. That's not the Vong, right? That's a different insect.
The Vong aren't insects.
Oh, that's right. They're like weird-looking skeleton men.
Yeah, they're almost like, I want to say like the closest comparison is orcs. So I thought the Vong would make... It's probably not a good place for, if you were going to make a new franchise, to start a series of movies. But the Vong are a great sci-fi villain for the Jedi. The Vong are immune to the Force. And by immune, I mean they're living beings that come from another galaxy that are completely cut off from the Force. And the Jedi eventually figure out that they were not always cut off from the Force. They were rejected by the Force.
Oh, okay.
They're genetic engineers, and all their technology is alive. They bioengineer all their tech. Their ships are living beings, their weapons are living beings, their armor is living. They grow all of it.
And don't they arrive on, like, planets?
Yeah, well, their ships are basically like self-contained ecosystems because they traveled through the galactic void, which even with all the technology of Star Wars is a feat they haven't achieved. No one in the Star Wars galaxy has ever left and returned from the galaxy. So they don't, like, their hyperspace technology, the distance between galaxies is so great that they still haven't made it to another galaxy. And there's an unexplored region of this galaxy somehow.
Yeah, I saw that on the map. It's like a third of the galaxy's just blacked out, basically.
Yeah, that was to let them still have some surprises. That was a good writing choice.
Yeah,
doesn't
I
make a
figured.
lot of sense. That's where that's why you don't know Thrawn's species, because the Chiss are out there in the unknown regions.
And then it allowed them to have the villains from KOTOR.
Because the Vong are so tied up in the Force lore, if you really wanted to explore what the Force is or a little bit more about how the Force works, that's a good challenge.
So does that mean that you couldn't shoot Force lightning at them?
Unclear. I can't remember if that happens. I think the main issue, they don't have any trouble fighting them necessarily.
Well, yeah, you can always throw rocks at them. I mean,
Yeah. The combat isn't the challenge. It's the fact that they can't sense them at all. And a lot of that also disrupts Jedi combat as well, because the whole notion of closing your eyes and deflecting the blaster bolts and stuff, that doesn't work on them.
Did someone try it?
Well, they immediately realize that it's like a total disconnect between their senses. It's almost like VR sickness looking at a Vong, because your eyes and ears and nose are telling you that there's this thing in front of you, but it's your Force sense is telling you there's nothing there.
Oh, that's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, they could do something with it if they wanted to, but they scrapped it, and they've totally. They could bring the Vong back, I guess, as a species that comes in from outside the galaxy, but there's no way they can do the Vong arc. They've totally blown that up.
There's no Jedi after. There's one, basically.
Yeah, like I said, if Disney had a plan,
They did.
Which is the problem.
They started with a battle station that could blow up 5 planets at once, and then they ended with a fleet that can blow up a planet per ship.
Yeah.
What more can you do with that? I guess have Thanos show up.
It's a shame because while the expanded universe is fanficky, and it's almost too happy. Like, everybody pairs off, everybody has kids, everybody's kids are friends.
Until one of them, starts to try and kill people.
But those are things that don't really happen in real life. Like, I'm not friends with the kids of my parents' friends. It's just not how that goes usually.
Why not?
Because we have nothing in common. We have
trying to
totally
talk to
different
them?
lives.
I think you need to reach out, Ben.
But I did think that even if you wanted to completely rewrite the arcs and the stories, that the twins, Jason and Jaina, are a logical next step in the series. That's Luke and Leia Part 2, but what if they were the Jedi they were supposed to be from the get-go? You can do so much with that. It's almost a reboot, and you could go on all kinds of fun Jedi adventures, and you got plenty of lightsabers and blaster battles right off the bat. But, yeah, for whatever reason, they decided not to do that.
Yeah, I actually don't know where they can go from the movies. Not that I really care, because I think I stopped caring after the 8th movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely a lot of people are way too invested in those movies. Like, they are just movies I didn't like. I just wish, and we've talked about this a million times, I just wish they'd picked a direction and gone with it.
Yeah, a direction rather than... Well, okay, we pretty much... I'm not going to say we know. We weren't there, obviously. But it really seems like they went, all right, they had an original trilogy. They had a prequel trilogy. So obviously, we're going to have a trilogy. Done. Let's break for lunch. We'll get J.J. Abrams. He can just kind of meander his way through one movie, and then we'll have another guy come in for the next movie. Didn't really seem like there was a... Like, no one sat down and sketched out a 3-story arc.
I guess I shouldn't say this because Kevin Feige is also pretty heavily involved in the continuity management of Marvel. So I don't know, maybe there is some responsibility at the top to say whether or not a story is on track. I was almost going to say, I understand Star Wars is trilogies. Okay, I don't agree with that thinking, but from the money perspective, I understand. And we've talked before, Star Wars isn't high art. They're fun adventure films. They're Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. And it's not hard to break a story up into 3 parts, like call to adventure, lowest point, overcoming the challenge. There's your 3 beats. You're going to divide into 3 movies. Hire a writer to do that. There's an easy path to a trilogy. I don't think it's necessarily the best story it could possibly be when you plan to have a trilogy like that, but you could definitely make a satisfying story. And even if you wanted to just soft reboot, just go ahead and do that. It just seemed like at every step of the way, Disney was kind of doing like a made-to-order sci-fi blockbuster. Like, they do The Force Awakens, and it's very clearly a soft reboot. And everybody's like, well, that's a soft reboot, therefore bad. So Disney's
it's too similar to the first one. And by the first one, I mean the first one release.
So Disney's like, course correct. Let's get auteur filmmaker Ryan Johnson with all these ideas
we'll
to come in and
completely different.
Yeah, to come in and do something new with it. And they do that, and they're like, I don't like it. It totally destroys Luke's character, which it did. But you asked for something different. You didn't want the reboot. You wanted something different. You wanted them to go in a radical new direction. So they bring in Ryan Johnson. He goes in a radical new direction, and then you don't like it. So then they course correct again. They're like, bring in J.J. Abrams to fix it. And J.J. Abrams has to do 2 movies in 1 movie, and it becomes a terrible mess. A laughable, terrible mess. Like, literally, it says... Palpatine is back somehow.
Which happens in the EU, and I think you showed me a quote of whoever did that who was like, we never should have brought him back. It really went back on the sacrifice that Vader did in that whole scene for Return of the Jedi, and it was a bad idea. It's like, yeah, I agree. And they brought him back. They got rid of Jason and Jaina and the Yuuzhan Vong, but they brought Palpatine's resurrection back.
Well, obviously, nobody is going to know who Jason and Jaina are. Nobody, as a proportion of people who saw Star Wars, almost nobody went on to read these books. Like, it's probably like not even 1% of people who have seen Star Wars have read a single EU book. But...
Well, that would have been an opportunity to get characters, not necessarily them, but those characters or those ideas out to a broader audience. But instead they're like, let's get Palpatine back.
Well, it's like, God help me, I'm going to quote him here, but it's like George Lucas said in that one interview, that the infamous interview where he made a comment about how he sold... to white slavers.
I'm sorry, what?
You didn't hear about the white slavers comment? George Lucas said he sold his project, his Star Wars, to the white slavers.
Oh my god. Dude should not be talking. He took Disney for a ride. He made one last humongous mint on that property.
Oh, I think, well, George Lucas, deep down, if I could read into his character a little bit, I don't think he's about the money. I mean, he likes his merchandising and
Mike,
stuff.
I don't think that's true.
I think more than that. I mean, I think he likes money. Who doesn't? He wants to be rich. He wants to be comfortable. But I think he also wants to prove he's a good filmmaker and a good writer, and he's the reason Star Wars is so beloved. And with the prequels, he kind of lost everybody's confidence, and he sold it to Disney. And during the talks with Disney, they're all pleasant with him. They're like, "Yeah, we really look forward to hearing from you, George. We really want to continue your legacy." And then he signs that paper, and they're like, "Get the out of my office." And he just got his ego kicked one more time. But he said in that same interview that he gave them his ideas and they didn't like any of them, which I don't find that hard to believe. But he said they were saying that they wanted to do something for the fans. They wanted to do basically a fan service film.
You can't make Star Wars fans happy, Disney. I don't know if you know this. You know it now.
They know it now.
Yeah. You gotta just say, we're gonna do whatever the we want to do.
Yeah. And they're gonna love it because it's Star Wars.
Exactly.
It's that simple, really.
George made a ton of money off the prequels, and I don't think hardly anyone liked those.
No.
You'll be fine.
Yeah, and they were fine. They did make billions off terrible, incoherent garbage.
Yeah, I was gonna say garbage, but I was gonna.
There's no other word for it. Those weren't stories. But I think that's the problem is when you're constantly, and I'm going to go ahead and risk another controversial opinion here. It's the fans' fault too.
I don't know if that's controversial. I agree with you 100%.
I mean, you guys need to chill out and let people make movies.
They were sending death threats to What's-Her-Nuts from the 8th movie.
Oh,
the one who played Rose.
Yeah, Rose. Yeah, I remember
It's
hearing
not
about that.
her fault. She didn't write the part and insert herself into the movie.
Yeah, she's an actress. She's just reading the lines, man.
She's doing her best with what she was given, people. Jesus Christ.
Oh, and let's be real. That wasn't the only problem.
Not
I'm gonna reiterate
by a
the problem. One of the problems with that movie. Have Rey and Poe ever met before the end of that movie? I'm not worried about Rose. I don't like side quests. I don't like especially pointless side quests. That's why I didn't like Rose as part of the movie. The actress was not the problem. The material she was given was the problem. And same for John Boyega. I think John Boyega is a fine actor. Didn't like the role of Finn that much.
Yeah.
But it's, like I said, they're just movies I didn't like. And I wish Disney had picked a direction, gone with it, and just ignored what people said they wanted.
It sounds like, did the EU, from what you read, did it feel like they did pick a direction and it was pretty uniform, like with the Yuzhan Vong or the Legacy of the Force, it's clearly headed somewhere?
Yeah, that's my understanding. I think, again, it's also a case of way less pressure.
Right. Each book doesn't need to make $1 billion back.
Yes. Well, and you're also not going to reach even, like I said, 1/100th the audience that the movies reached. People don't read books. Like, bad from a book podcast, but
we know what we're about.
How many people really are going to sign up to read the 19 books of the Yuzhan Vong series?
I'm kind of daunted just looking at that.
Yeah. So I think what they did, they're pretty famous for when they were starting these series. The series are not all written by one author. They're written by that stable of authors, and they would get all the people who were going to work on that series out to Skywalker Ranch. And I'm not kidding. That's where they had a big planning session out there.
Okay.
They'd get everybody together. They'd plan out the series, and people would, I think, simultaneously start working on their piece of it. So I do think they released sequentially so that there was time to tweak and change things to make sure everything fit together nicely. But yeah, I don't think they really left a lot of time to respond to fan input. And they didn't really have the internet, especially when New Jedi Order was coming out, was not what it is today. There were forums and stuff where people discussed this, but you didn't have
An asshole tweeting at you all of his opinions.
You didn't have people tweeting at you. You didn't have 50,000 YouTube video essay hot takes. You didn't have two failed authors talking about you on their dumb podcast. You do now.
Got him.
I think it was just way less pressure. And so I think they had the freedom to do that because they knew the type of people who were going to sign up to read a 19-book series were, I don't know, either more receptive to your content. Like it's just they're less likely to give you a harsh critique, I think. And they did get harsh critiques. Like I do think I remember seeing that people did not like Legacy of the Force. And they're like, I'll even say, had I not been knee deep in my upperclassman computer science degree work and not in the mood to read anything remotely challenging, I probably wouldn't have finished the Yuuzhan Vong War. But I wanted to read something, so I kept reading these Star Wars books for children.
To get through all 19 books.
Well, they are, like, I'd say that these are maybe written at an 8th grade reading level. Which is not a knock against the authors. That's what they're intended to be.
So what? Because you're saying you could leave out entire books, which when you have 19 books makes a lot of sense. Were there any in particular that stood out as like exceptionally good?
No.
All right. Good night, everyone.
No, I wish I could say that there were. There are authors whose names I remember and I have good or bad associations with, but to be perfectly honest with you, dude, I don't remember any of the names of any of the books that I read in the entire EU.
Oh, wow.
I remember the arcs, but I read them like comic books. It'd be like asking me to remember the name of an issue.
So you don't have any standout authors either, then? Cause...
Timothy Zahn, Karen Travis. Name me the authors in Legacy of the Force. Do you have it up?
Let me pull it up.
I'll tell you which ones I liked.
Are there really only 3 authors?
Yeah, they each took turns.
Okay, Karen Travis, Aaron Alston, and Troy Denning.
Troy Denning I liked. I like him. I don't remember Aaron Alston super well. I didn't have a negative impression of any of them. But Troy Denning, I remember. I always liked his stuff. Karen Travis writes a lot of the Mandalorian stuff. So that's probably why they brought her into that series, because she was a big part of like the Boba Fett lore. And because Boba Fett was going to play such a big role. I could tell you one I don't like, and this is an unpopular opinion, and I'm sorry, book nerds. I don't like R.A. Salvatore.
Oh my god.
I find his writing very dry, and that's kind of just the best way I can think to describe it. It's just dry. I don't engage with it very well. He tells a story in a very straightforward way that I don't particularly enjoy reading. Do not like the Drist Do'Urden novels. Did not like his contribution to Star Wars. Did not seek out any of his other books.
Well, if it helps, he only wrote 2 Star Wars books.
Yeah,
it does help. He started the Yuuzhan Vong with Vector Prime, and then he did the novelization of Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, I did not like Vector Prime. I had to muscle through that one. I do remember that. I remember thinking, I have tried to read R.A. Salvatore books on 3 separate occasions. That was one of them. People recommend them to me. He's a really beloved author. He writes a ton of people's favorite stuff. It's just not for me. Like, he's a competent author. He tells a story. Like I said, it's dry. And I don't like it. I like my like my bougie cyberpunk novels. What can I say?
And So where were you when you stopped reading? You were reading the last series that they did.
I was reading Fate of the Jedi, and I think I was on the 4th book.
So what is Fate of the Jedi?
Fate of the Jedi follows the aftermath of the brief civil war caused by Jason Solo in Legacy of the Force, where Luke Skywalker is kind of exiled from the New Republic, and he and his son go on kind of a journey of like Force self-discovery to try to reconcile with the death of Mara Jade. Like, Luke is out, and that's bad because shit really starts kicking off. The Jedi Order is not very popular.
Right. They managed to start a lot of wars.
Yeah, and what I really did like about Fate of the Jedi, and if you wanted to, I might be convinced to like re-explore that for the podcast, because I think they did finish it.
Okay.
Fate of the Jedi starts to explore how everyone else in the galaxy is starting to get a little tired of these weird religious weirdos being in charge of stuff. And they're starting to get a little sick of every major conflict in the galaxy coming down to a Jedi versus a Sith. Maybe they should just not. And it's really hard to disagree with. And I really like it. And so they start trying to put a bunch of rules on the Jedi Order, and it's kind of like a Marvel Civil War thing where it's like, you guys have all this crazy power and like world-changing abilities. Maybe we should have some oversight on you. And Captain America's like, no, you shouldn't. And it had to be Captain America who said that, because otherwise you'd be like, no, you should. I don't trust you. It only works if Captain America, the one with unimpeachable integrity, says that. So the Jedi, you have spent all these books seeing them from a sympathetic angle. You know what mistakes were made and why things happened the way they did, but put yourself in the shoes of the average citizen of the galaxy, and you're like, yeah, we've lost a lot of credibility.
You guys have killed a lot of people or led to their deaths.
But you also know that the Jedi, like, if there aren't Jedi, then that just opens it up for the people who like to operate in darkness to operate in darkness. So it's...
Yeah, it's like, well, okay, I'm going to go off on a quick tangent, but they outlaw superheroes in The Incredibles, and I always wondered where the supervillains went, because somehow outlawing superheroes just did the trick. I don't think you'd do that here, right? I don't think saying, like, no more Jedi, and they're just gone forever, and so are the Sith.
Yeah, the one vivid memory I have from Fate of the Jedi, I don't remember a lot about that series, because I was at a point in, like, I was finishing up college now, I had more time to read, and I wanted to read a little bit more widely, and I wanted to sort of read more of the novels that I kind of wanted to write.
You don't want to write a Star Wars novel?
If they're asking, I would. Let me write in the EU, though. I don't want to write the new stuff. Unless you want me to reboot the movies for you.
Yeah, we can do that.
Honestly, they should... Like, the EU novels do tend to get a little soap opera-y, because you have this, like, rotating cast of characters, and they always have to be constant drama and everything, and...
Yeah, Luke goes through more wars in his lifetime than most people go through in like 4 or 5 generations.
Yeah.
It's just, there's always another war just right around the corner.
Yeah, so it's a soap opera, and it gets messy and weird, and the relationships and canon and everything is all over the place, and it's almost like, I want to say like pro wrestling, how it's never going to end. There's just constantly different good guys and bad guys fighting about being good and bad.
I mean, I would I would pay money for The Rock or Stone Cold Steve Austin to wield a lightsaber at someone. I mean...
Dude, why didn't they get The Rock?
I don't know, but hey, there
He's
you go.
He's a talented actor.
We just figured out one of the ways. Disney, get in touch with us. We will reboot.
Disney, you already have The Rock. He was in that movie, the Moana.
Fairy? Oh, okay.
You got the man to sing. He can't sing, but it was delightful.
I actually saw that one. That was a good movie.
I haven't seen it. I've just seen the part where he sings. And it's like, you know what? You're not a good singer, but you're having so much fun that I'm having fun.
I feel like that's a lot of his movies. They're like cheesy B movies with with tons of money dumped into it. And it's just like, oh, well, The Rock is really enjoying it, though. He's really giving it his all.
Did you see the new Jumanji?
I saw the first one.
I saw the first one, too. I loved that movie.
It was great, right?
Yeah. It was way better than it had any right to be.
Exactly. So what was what was the last thing you remember from the Star Wars EU?
The Jedi Temple getting invaded by Mandalorians.
Oh! Okay.
That's the last thing I remember. And Han and Leia's grandchild, Jason Solo's daughter, has I want to say she's got like a pet giant cat or something. I could be making that up or conflating two things. But yeah, Leia and Han have to raise their granddaughter for reasons.
They did a good job with the other three kids, so I'm sure.
Well, they did a good job with Anakin. I mean, he died a hero as well. He died saving a bunch of people, so he was a...
Did he also have a moon dropped on him?
No. Well, the thing was, the Yuuzhan Vong have... Their spaceships are propelled not by, like, shooting stuff out the back the way ours are propelled. They have some...
Scientific term.
They have some sort of way of latching on to a massive body and pulling their ships towards it by generating a gravitational field. Conversely, they have gravity-based weapons. So what they did was they used a gravity weapon to pull this moon into its planet, and Han, Chewie, and Anakin were there trying to help as many people get off the planet as possible, and Anakin messed up or screwed up or something, and Chewie had to run back out, and I think Chewie just somehow manages to throw Anakin into the ship, and the ship has to take off. It doesn't have time to get Chewie as well, and that's how Chewie winds up being left behind to be destroyed in the collision.
How did Anakin die?
Anakin dies, I forget the specific situation, but he has to fight like a bunch of Yuuzhan Vong, and he manages to tap into some force power that, like Luke at the end of, I forget what it's even called, the middle movie. You know how he like fades away? Like Anakin basically blows through his entire life force to win this battle. And he sacrifices himself that way. And he's haunted by the fact that Chewie died for him. Han has a hard time even looking at him. And when he dies that way, like obviously Han feels even worse. And they had a complicated thing. But I think the implication is that Anakin makes peace with it. He does not fall to the dark side, and he dies saving a bunch of people, and that's also, like, part of the reason Leia named him Anakin was to try to, like, rehabilitate that name.
Okay. That is interesting, because it would be like if she named her child, like, Adolf. Like,
Yeah. Well, and it's like, you know, Harry Potter names his kid Severus. Well, like one of the 50 names Harry Potter gives his kid to honor the many, many people who died for him.
Albus Severus Al Potter. Is that?
It was like Albus Severus, what? Oh, Sirius Remus? I forget.
So you never finished Fate of the Jedi?
I haven't. I would be willing to go back to it.
Oh
I
my
was
God.
enjoying it. I was enjoying it. It's just when they said it wasn't canon anymore, I was like, all right, you know what? I need to read big boy books. So
I'm big boy.
I'm just going to get off the train now because, and at that time, I think I was a little bit more interested in canon. I don't want to say obsessed with canon, but I was like, well, I'm not going to read what's not canon, but I don't care anymore. So I'll read the better story. If your fanfic is better, I'll read it.
That's fair. Any closing things that you want to get off your chest?
like grievances?
Anything at all. Closing remarks.
I guess I'd say if you're a big fan of Star Wars and you were dissatisfied with the movies, I think there is stuff in the EU or Legends it's now called, that is worth checking out. Not all gold. My brain has definitely condensed those 19 books of the Yuzong Vong War down to the highlights. It's up to you if you'd want to go through it. I kind of like the idea that there can be different universes of Star Wars, that it makes it more mythological to me. You know, there's not one version of Heracles challenges.
Well, was there a version of Greek mythology where like the gods won? They beat they threw out the Titans, right? Kronos was a Titan.
Yeah.
And then like they just all killed each other, and it was all really sad and depressing. And that was the end.
I think like future archaeologists will liken that to Norse mythology, where they feel like they only have like 35% of the text. and they're just kind of like, I don't know if Freya and Frigg and Freya, and I don't know if they're all one god or two gods, or we can't really tell. The source material is contradictory and unclear. That's how they're watching the Disney trilogy, and they're like, we're obviously missing 6 movies. So no, I don't know if they're still publishing them. I mean, I'm sure there'll be an ebook forever. Maybe check them out. I think I'd give it a soft recommendation. If you read a lot and you don't mind reading through some less than stellar material,
some filler.
If you're into Star Wars and you read a lot and you don't mind reading through a bunch of junk, there's good stuff in there. Like, I would liken it to the quality of writing you get in a manga or a comic, but without the art. So you have to deal with those like less than stellar portions where
Actually, that brings something up. They do have comic representations of some of this stuff. Or
I did read the Cade Skywalker comics.
Yes, I actually think that's the furthest out timeline-wise, actually.
Yeah, it goes full circle. The Jedi are gone again or whatever.
And then they come back with drug-addicted Cade Skywalker to the rescue.
I love Cade's death stick addiction.
And he fights an evil group of Sith. Would you recommend...
Art in that is really good, actually.
So,
I'd recommend that on the art alone.
Would you also recommend any comic book or condensed audiobook versions of these books?
I'll tell you what, if the audiobooks are all of the same quality as the Dark Force Rising audiobook that I listened to, I would say yeah. I think that it did drag a little. It couldn't be saved from some of the boring writing, but you have the option of speeding it up. You have the option of skipping that if you really want. But the audio production made it a lot easier to digest, which we can have another episode at some point about whether or not that's cheating. Are you really reading a book if you just listen to a fancy radio play? Probably not. I don't care.
We're going to say no when we tally up our page counts at this
At the end of the year.
halfway through the year contest update thing. So yeah.
You're going to count me one less book.
You goddamn right.
Yeah. But yeah, it's worth preserving. It's a certainly a more optimistic version of Star Wars, if that's what you're into. But it has a lot of drama, soap opera level tension. And like I said, it is written at like an 8th grade level, so if you are, as we are, 30-something-year-old men, it's probably not going to challenge you a ton, but if you're just looking to relax with a book, that might be the way to go.
All right. On that note, let's wrap up and say that next month's book, I guess we're deciding that next week. So it was originally going to be Starship Troopers, but you didn't want to read a book about...
I wasn't ready to tackle fascism.
Yeah, yeah. And then we had another book lined up, and that kind of fell through. So I'm going to make Ben pick on air between 5 different books.
Okay, yeah. The old judging books by their cover. So look forward to one of those episodes.
Follow us on Twitter. We're at WAB Pod, I think.
Follow us on Twitter at WAB Pod. If you feel like maybe we deserve a little something special for the wonderful content we bring you, you could consider buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/WABpod. And you can check us out on our blog at blog.wordsaboutbooks.ninja. I am getting around to updating that one of these days, I promise. We do still have the Goodreads group. I'm trying to keep it up to date. I know a few people pay attention to that. So
yeah.
I haven't forgotten it.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. And
I thought that was on my end, honestly. I was like, God, I'm so sick of my cat.
my wife's running the vacuum. I think he's scared. Come here.
He should be scared.
Come here. Do you want to podcast with me? You want to say hi to the listeners?